Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered. Released December of 2024. Available on all modern platforms, retailing for $29.99. As the title suggests, this is a remastering of Soul Reaver 1 and 2, which together tell you most of the story of Raziel, who was one of the vampire lieutenants of Kain, but when he grew wings before anyone else, Kain couldn't have any of that, so had him executed. This would lead to Raziel working for the Elder God, a cosmically powerful squid that needs Raziel to serve as a wraith, a being that can go between the two worlds and collect souls for the Elder God to eat. Though truthfully, Raziel doesn't work for the Elder God for all that long, as Raziel does awake to a dystopian world that's slowly dying, and is far more interested in getting revenge on Kain and his fellow lieutenants than on doing any service to the Elder God. So in Soul Reaver 1, you'll go around to the various strongholds of Kain's lieutenants, fight your way through, get some revenge, and Raziel will get a shiny new ability for defeating one of his former friends. It's kinda like Mega Man, but with vampires. And this remaster actually improves Soul Reaver 1 quite a bit, as it was a 3D platformer for the PlayStation 1 that predated the analog controllers for the PlayStation 1. And having analog controls does make this game considerably easier, as most areas do take the form of prolonged platforming puzzles. Having more precision in your controls makes things far less frustrating, though you'll still have the frustration of fighting enemies, as a great many of the enemies in this game are actually vampires, and they need to be impaled in order to be finished off, so you either need a spike around the room to throw them on, or a weapon to run them through with. This does make sense in the context of the universe we're in, but it still gets old pretty quick. But overall, this remaster is definitely the best way to play Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 1. On the other hand, Soul Reaver 2 doesn't receive as much of an upgrade, as it was a PlayStation 2 game, albeit a fairly early one. It already had a fairly modern control scheme. Soul Reaver 2 picks up almost exactly where Soul Reaver 1 left off. Raziel finds himself in the past. The sorcerer Mobius has taken Raziel to a time before Kain was actually a vampire. Though in fairness, Kain is also doing some time travel shenanigans through this game. But this makes for an interesting contrast with the first game. As the first game, everything was in decay. The world looked as if there was not much time left for it. But here in Soul Reaver 2, you see a world that actually looks livable. And at first, this might actually give you hope for the world of Nosgoth. However, the only way to change anything is through time travel paradoxes, which have their own repercussions, which does still paint a very bleak future for Nosgoth no matter what may unfold. Soul Reaver 2 has a very interesting story to tell. Unfortunately, its gameplay is not quite as strong as the first game. Still, having both games in one package is very nice, as you can almost play them as one continuous experience. Unfortunately, you don't get a resolution to Raziel's story. The last part of his story was told in Legacy of Kain Defiance, which is unfortunately and rather strangely absent in this release. So is Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered worth your time and money? Well, at its price of $30, it's actually a fairly good deal, as that is only $15 per game, and both of these games are easily worth more than that, with their original retail prices back in the day being $40 and $50 respectively. And you are getting more than the games here. There's a great deal of bonus content that will be of interest to anyone that is a fan of the Legacy of Kain series. And I would assume you're a fan of that series if you're interested in this collection to begin with. It is somewhat odd that it's just Soul Reaver 1 and 2. At the very least, Legacy of Kain Defiant should have been here, as that does actually give an ending to Raziel's story. But perhaps we'll see that release in a separate collection down the line. So yes, I absolutely do recommend Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver 1 and 2 Remastered. It shows you the dark future of the world of Nosgoth, and gives you a small sliver of hope that this may be avoided. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.
scourge of the